it's very easy in this day and age for data to be disclosed in significant quantities. Hopefully the next item is for you.
So what I'll do is just add a little bit more color and give you some examples, statistics from September of '09 to December of 2010. There were 221 reports involving breaches over 500, and as Shawn mentioned, there are two major categories. But you may think a breach over 500, once again, sitting there, can't happen to me. I'm a small practice, so on and so forth. It can happen to you, and most of the time it is accidental. I'll give you another example that happened to one of our insureds recently. It's a practice that is making the transition from paper records to EMR. It's an OBGYN practice, and they have multiple offices, and one of the doctors was treating a patient at another office the next day, collected his paper records, brought them with him, put them in the back seat of his car, threw a heap of clothes on top of the records that he was taking to Goodwill, drove his car to the Home Depot parking lot, scooped everything out of the car, and threw it all in the Goodwill. He had a rough idea of what patients he was seeing the next day, but the first thing he did was call us. Called his medical malpractice insurance company. A year ago we would have said, well, we can't really help you. We don't insure for that. And now we do, but it's incumbent upon the physicians, once again, to educate themselves, to understand that these exposures exist, that accidents do happen. The intentional breaches are a whole other story, with disgruntled employees. But, laptops, theft and loss are 67%, represents 67%, which is a pretty large number. Laptops and other portable storage devices account for another 38% of large breaches. And paper records are really sort of dwindling, they're 21%. But, as I just mentioned, with the transition going on to EMR, it's a real possibility that you're still going to lose those paper records. 14,000 plus reports of breaches under 500 patients. The next slide, we sort of break it down for you by type of breach, which I think is also important for you to realize that you can see the percent of theft, unauthorized access, improper disposal, loss, or a hacking incident. You can see that theft represents 51%, an overwhelming number of the breaches that occur. Breaches by location. So once again, this is just adding further color to where the breaches come from. And so you see that 21% still are paper records, 16% are a desktop computer. Portable electronic devices is obviously a number that's going to be on the rise. Most doctors' offices I've gone into recently have a little tablet, an iPad or whatever, and the doctor is literally interfacing with that. And I asked my own doctor, I said, is that encrypted? No. How do you carry that around? Just in a little briefcase. What if you lose it? It's not, oh, there's a password on it. I will tell you that hackers have gotten extremely sophisticated. The little password that you think you have, the 4-number password you have on your iPhone or your iPad or your laptop, that's not going to stop it. That doesn't even scratch the surface. They will get access to the information. The best thing you can do is A, have coverage, B, know the steps you need to take to encrypt the data, to protect the data. So here's the big daunting task. So let's say you have a breach and you don't want to be in violation of HIPAA and high tech. What do you need to do? The action steps you need to take, and this says for a large-scale data breach, but this is really for large or small. It's some adjectives that come to mind when I look at this list are daunting, confusing, stressful, and most important, expensive. If you think hiring an IT forensic expert is cheap, think again. If you think consulting these attorneys is cheap, think again. The topic that came up at one of our last board meetings when we were discussing these products with the physicians, generally their first inclination is to call the attorney. I don't know what to do about this, call my attorney. Well, when you call your attorney, you know what happens. The bill starts ringing up. Okay, and so it's incumbent upon you to know what to do in the event of these, but if you have coverage in place, which I'll talk about a couple slides later, it does it all for you. Okay, it's as simple as pushing a button and making a phone call and saying, I think I've had a breach. I don't know what was breached, but I think there was a breach. There's a forensic team waiting to jump in, into action. There's legal counsel waiting to jump into action. And all of these steps that we list here, which are important, I'm going to go through them. So consult legal outside counsel, number 1. Hire an IT computer forensic expert, number 2. Consult a public relations crisis communication firm, very important. The last thing you want to do is handle carrying a message that your practice, who you've talked about being great in the community, you may have billboards up in the community, you have the trust of your patients. The last thing you want is for your patients now to be viewing you as, oh my God, they lost all these, they lost these people's identity, they lost their, oh my God, I'm never going to that practice. So it's very, very important to hire people who are professionals at making a wrong seem right, or at least sugarcoating what happened, or at least helping you communicate it to the public in an articulate way that the public understands. These things happen, but here's what we're doing as a result of it happening. We're looking out for your best interest. So the communication plan, a breach notification letter is a mandate of high tech, which Shawn mentioned earlier. It has to go out. You have to notify the public or local media that a breach has occurred. And you generally have to do a news release or a web post. You have to hire a mail house for the printing, because I'm assuming that most of the practices we're speaking to don't have the resources, the administrative resources, to handle sending out 10,000 letters or however, whatever the number is. So you're going to have to outsource that. You're going to have to hire a phone company. You're going to have to implement a 1-800 number for people to call and say, I'm confused, were my records lost, stolen, so on and so forth. That involves having a call center, and you're going to need, most importantly and most expensive on this list, is a company that specializes in credit monitoring and identity theft and fraud protection. You've probably heard of LifeLock and companies such as that. It's not cheap to provide that for 500 people. It's not cheap to provide that service for 20 people. So you probably, these are, when I say it's an Armageddon type situation, these are things that are happening now, and for most medical practices that are clients of ours that we speak to, they're very, very running on a very thin margin. If your family practice, you're seeing 3 patients to break even, your 4th patient is your margin. If something like this happens to you, it could ruin your whole